Good evening. We're actually not with the family right now. We're with some of the community activists and legislators who have been in the courtroom and who are at the state trial, who have been supporting the African American community through this very difficult time. Guys, I'm just going to let you tell our viewers who you are and why you're here.
State Representative Wendell Gilliard, proudly representing District 111.
What do you think this sentence means to the African American community and to our community as a whole after the 2 years?
I'm glad you said that, because what impacts one community everywhere impacts all community anywhere. We have to understand that. You know, to me, it's beyond black and white. This is a humane thing, and we have to understand that. The bottom line, coming here for the last 4 days, the message that I'll be taking back Columbia, along with the representative of National Action Network, people like Elder Johnson, Dr. Nelson Rivers, we have work to do in our state. Okay, we have to understand that. If we don't understand that, we're going to have another situation as such. That's why you see us out here every day trying to promote the progress, the good and the welfare of our communities, because if we don't do that, then we've gone back and we've turned our back with a deaf ear, and that is very dangerous. We have to be proactive. We have to keep talking progressiveness, how we're going to move forward from a positive aspect, and the only way we're going to do that, and I want everybody to understand this, you cannot have social change without economic equality and justice for all. If we don't understand that, we're not going to change from the social aspect. My heart goes out to both families. I feel like a lot of these leaders that I was coming here with the last couple of days with, you know, we shared tears in there for both sides today, okay? Because we have to understand this is a human thing. It's not a black and white issue. This is a humane thing.
Let me pull you in, Elder. Okay. Tell us who you are first.
I'm Elder Johnson, James Johnson, the state president of National Action Network.
What do you make of this sentence? Coming out of a mistrial last year, a lot of disappointment for a lot of people that there wasn't some closure. What do you make of the closure here today?
Well, I think it sent a loud message across America today, especially the police departments all over America, that, you know, you just can't go around killing a black man and think you're going to get off free, which would happen in so many years. And I applaud the people in the state of South Carolina. They stuck with it, especially their solicitor, Scarlett Wilson. She stuck with it to see that, you know, justice will be prevail. But then again, both families lose. You know, tears come out my eyes for both of the families today. Up until Michael Slager incident 2 years ago, his family said he was a good man, and I believe that. But you know, someone has died in there. Here's another Christmas 2 years going by without their Walter Scott. So I feel their pain also. But the family is a forgiving family, and they did forgiveness for Michael Slager, and Michael Slager acknowledged that he forgave them.
One of the things that came up during this sentencing was how the neighborhoods around where Walter Scott was shot have been policed over the years, and how the people that live in those communities, the community I actually live in where my father grew up, and I'm interested in your perspective about the conversation that came up about the policing in those communities.
Well, I think Andy Savage said a wrong message. We have good people in bad communities. So what he did is he painted those communities as a bad community, and everybody in that community is bad people, and that is so wrong. Nobody wants crimes in their community, not at all. And I think North Charleston itself didn't do a good job in influencing that community, because even today we got guns in our community. People are getting killed every week in our community because of the guns in our community. So we got a lot of work to do. And the civil rights organization are willing to work with North Charleston to deal with some of those crimes in that community.
Yes, sir. Guys, thank you both very much for being here, for your statements. Brad, you just heard from some of the community leaders as well as one of our legislators in this area. I'm going to send it back to you as we continue to talk to the folks in this area following the sentencing.
All right, Rebecca, thank you.
We want to go back down to the federal courthouse right now. News 2's Rebecca Collett is standing with another community activist, Pastor Thomas Dixon, to find out what his reaction is to this sentence of 20 years in prison for Michael Slager. Rebecca.
Carolyn, thank you for sending it back out to us. This is obviously a very important figure, a face that we've seen a lot through this trial in this state level, and you've been here the last couple of days. As you came out, I'd just really be interested in your perspective on the sentencing today.
Long time, 2.5 years. On April 4th, 2015, there were 8 shots that were heard around the world. North Charleston and the Low Country has been on the spotlight ever since, and we were waiting patiently for justice to be served. Today, which is contrary to what normally happens in the state of South Carolina and didn't happen 1 year ago right here, had to go to a federal court, but today justice was served. Today the message was sent not only that Black Lives Matters, but in particular Walter Scott's life mattered in sentencing Officer Slager, the former Officer Slager, to 20 years.
One of the things that Scarlett Wilson said in court was that no matter what happened at the state level, in her circuit, this had such a big deal because it was at the federal level. Can you talk about why addressing civil rights at this juncture is so important?
It's really important. The state of South Carolina should realize their error in the fact that there have been very few prosecutions of law enforcement officers for these type of crimes. And when it comes to civil rights, African Americans in South Carolina have continually been underserved, have been disenfranchised from this community. And law enforcement has levied unfair treatment within the African American community. Today, it's been uncovered at the level of a murder. And not only uncovered, but there's been a sentence handed down, which is something that's unusual here in South Carolina. Today, a message has been sent across South Carolina that equal rights for all and justice for all will eventually be the order of the day. Because as of right now, in South Carolina, liberty and justice for all is not the order of the day. If it has to start with law enforcement, well and good, but we also have problems in the school systems and other areas that need to be addressed. But today a message has been sent. Those 8 shots that were heard around the world has been sent. That message has been sent to North Charleston police departments and police departments across South Carolina, saying enough is enough, and it's time for us to treat everyone fairly and equally.
So where do we go from here now that we have this sentencing and this stage is behind us? What happens next? What do you want to see happen next?
What I would like to see happen next is that in North Charleston in particular, North Charleston City Hall and their police department have never really taken that responsibility that should be. We talked about inside of the courtroom, we talked about programs that need to be put in place that aren't put in place. There has not been, even through the mayor's office there, just that acceptance of, we really made a mistake this time. And the biggest mistake that was actually made was the fact that Faden Santana, the man that had the courage to step up with a video, in spite of fear and intimidation, still produced that video that led us to this day. Without him, we never would have gotten to this day. But to this day, outside of the social justice, the civil rights organizations recognition, City Hall in North Charleston has never said, "Great job, Mr. Santana." Faden did what we expect all citizens to do, to stand up against wrong and to recognize that it's an obligation of all citizens to stand against wrong. He did that, but the city has never given him any recognition. There should be a Faden Santana Day. He should be declared a hero and given that recognition and any kind of stipend, because he did what was necessary in order to promote the real will of the United States, and that's we support what's right and we stand against what's wrong.
I have to ask you this. This is an issue that comes up over and over and over again. Why did Walter Scott run over a taillight? And what would you say to the community when they're dealing with officers and these questions? What would you say about the running? Because the defense made an issue of it. The defense wanted Walter Scott to have some of the blame in this shooting. What do you say to that?
I would say that running does not constitute execution, regardless of whether he ran or not, over a broken taillight. Just like his brother said, his brother brought a $1.50 taillight into the court, and his brother died over a $1.50 taillight. We should be able to trust law enforcement to the point that their judgment calls will not include a jury decision and an execution. What Michael Slager did that day, even though Walter Scott ran, he decided that Walter Scott was not worthy of those things, a trial, a jury, and things like that. He decided that he was going to be judge, jury, and executioner right there. So whether Walter Scott ran or not is irrelevant. What we have to look at is what really happened. And what really happened was we had a law enforcement officer who was trained, supposedly trained, who was sworn to serve and protect, decide at the last minute, as a man got away from his custody and broke and ran and turned his back to him, this officer decided that, broken tail light or not, I'm gonna kill him. And it's obvious by the number of shots that was fired. 8 shots were fired, 5 hit Walter Scott, and it's funny, if you look at the video, 7 shots were fired, and then there was a pause between that 8th shot. You can't tell me that there wasn't a forethought and malice involved in all of that. He knew exactly what he was doing, and then he turned around and tried to cover his crime up. So let's look at the real criminal involved in this. And Walter Scott's running, that's not a criminal offense.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Let me ask you this. Now that we've come to the conclusion in the legal sense of this shooting, what do you make of the 240 months, of 20 years?
I would have preferred to see better, but if the family is satisfied with it, then I'm satisfied with it. 20 years is a good sentence. Less than that, I would have definitely had my issues. But 20 years is a good sentence handed down. It's a sentence that was handed down in a state that doesn't prosecute or doesn't indict, even indict law enforcement officers. So it is progress. You know, this man was guilty. The video clearly showed it. And I don't see how they came up with a hung jury a year ago. But they did. So now we went to the federal court, and the federal court decided, no, it wasn't. There's no need for any hung juries. And this guy is guilty, and we're going to sentence him as such. 20 years, 240 months, I'll take it.
Let me ask you this, final question this time. As just a person, as a man that lives in this community, what was the most poignant moment in court for you today?
As I listened to the Scott family recounting their interaction with their loved one, Mrs. Scott talking about her son, talking about how he called her Smurf, and at the same time as she was talking, Walter Scott's youngest son, Miles, broke down and had to leave the room there. And there's something that I didn't realize that happened in her conversation, was that while she was on the phone with him after he got tased, there came a point, because Walter Scott's son, Miles, was there at the time, that he actually took the phone from her and listened as his father, possibly even the shots were fired that killed him. I don't know. I haven't talked to him about that. I think that's a little too sensitive for me to ask him about. But he heard what was happening to his father, and he'll have to live with that for the rest of his life. And he'll have to find a way to reconcile his life with law enforcement and and respect for those who are sworn to serve and protect, which leaves a whole another issue. But the testimony, the pleas from the family today, as they recounted Walter Scott's life, Lamar's life as his mother called him, and the good times, and the fact that those good times will not happen from that day forward, and that there'll always be that space. The legacy in that family will be that video forever. 100 years from now, they'll be able to they'll still probably show that video. This was Walter Scott, and this is how he died in North Charleston at the hands of a police officer. That was important.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your time, and thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thank you.
Carolyn, I'm going to send it back into you guys. Actually, if we can just hold on, we'll just show you the Andy Savage's team. The defense attorney is leaving. Andy! Andy! I'm going to walk over and see if there's anything he wants to say. You guys got it?
Rebecca Collett downtown.
Yeah,
trying to chase down
Rebecca's
Andy
trying
Savage.
to reach out to Andy Savage as he and his wife and his team leave the courtroom. We'll give her an opportunity to do that. Pastor Thomas Dixon, someone who's very close to the Scott family.
Andy, anything you want to say about what happened today? It's a disappointing day for you, probably not what you anticipated.
All right, Rebecca, Collett trying to get comments, reaction from the attorney for Michael Slager, Andy Savage, as he leaves the courtroom. Most often, traditionally, he has spoken with us, but today, not having anything to say to the media, perhaps upset, disappointed, not sure. Usually he does speak with us. Perhaps he will release a statement later. But again, we see Andy Savage and his wife walking away from the federal courthouse, not with the Slager family. We don't know if the family has already left the courthouse or not. Of course, we will continue to watch very closely, and we'll perhaps try to get comments from them as well. Of course, a very difficult day for both the Scott as well as Slager families. We understand those who want to maintain their privacy. But we will go back down to downtown Charleston right now, where Rebecca Collett. Rebecca, we know that you tried to get a comment from Andy Savage. He's not willing to speak with us today.
Right, Carolyn, you pointed out, usually very media friendly, usually very much ready to tell his story. Obviously a disappointment today, and let me give you a little bit of perspective on why this was most likely a really disappointing day for them. They were arguing that what Michael Slager did was manslaughter, which would be about 10 to 12 years in prison. They were also asking for what's called a variance, and what that variance would have done is, because of the conditions that they were making the argument Michael Slager would have been in jail, they were asking the judge for even a further reduction. So they were anticipating Michael Slager serving less than 10 years in jail. And we now know that he is going to have to serve 20. A couple of other things at play here that happened in the courtroom. When Andy got up to speak right before we heard from the folks supporting Michael Slager, he took an issue with something the judge said. The judge said early on this morning that he had consulted with his law clerks as well as his wife, who is a pathologist. And so when Andy got up to speak, he was very frustrated, and here's why. He said that this was supposed to be the judge's full decision, and he shouldn't have been talking to any of those people about the decision. And he said that if this was a jury trial and a jury had asked the opinions of other people, that would have been illegal. So Andy said that what happened today was a violation of Michael Slager's constitutional rights to be before just the judge. So he was very frustrated in court about what the judge had said before he made any of his rulings today. And so leaving today likely very upset. In previous times when I have talked with Andy Savage, and I've been covering this since the day of the shooting, every time I've talked to Andy Savage, he has been completely convinced that Michael Slager was innocent of any wrongdoing. Not that he didn't shoot Walter Scott, but that he was innocent of doing anything wrong in that shooting. So to now be at this point, it's likely this is a very personal blow to him. 2 years of being involved in this case to end the way that it did. Totally, I assume, not what he's expecting from the previous conversations, and he probably taking it very personally, having become very close to the family. We even heard from one of the investigators that worked on this defense team, who was there speaking on behalf of Michael Slager today. So this entire team that's been rallied around Michael Slager has been very close with them, getting to know the family, getting to know Slager's newborn son, who was born just a couple of weeks after the shooting. So it's likely at some point perhaps we will hear from Andy Savage, but as you saw today, tight-lipped, stone-faced, heads down. If you saw the posture, obviously very disappointed. Carolyn.
All right, News 2's Rebecca Collett outside the federal courthouse in downtown Charleston, again explaining why perhaps we did not hear from the defense team for Michael Slager, Andy Savage, as he walked away from that courtroom. As Rebecca described, generally will give the media a word, a comment, some reaction, but not so much today after hearing that his client, Michael Slager, will go to prison for at least 20 years. 20 years in prison. That's the sentence given to former North Charleston police officer. The sentence stems from the shooting death of Walter Scott. Scott was shot and killed by Michael Slager after the two men were involved in a scuffle, and then Scott ran away from the officer. Today, a judge ruled the shooting was second-degree murder, not manslaughter. We are bringing you team coverage tonight. News 2's Sophia Arizosa has reaction from the Scott family, but we begin with News 2's Rebecca Collett, who's covered the case and the trials from the beginning. Good evening, Rebecca.
Carolyn, good evening. What I can tell you in court, there was very emotional testimony. The Scott family saying they reject any notion that there was any fight between these two men. There was also emotional testimony from Slager's family asking the judge to be merciful. Before handing down his sentence, the judge said it was obvious Michael Slager had lived a spotless life, but he followed by saying this shooting should have never happened. Cameras are not allowed in court, so we are relying on the evidence to paint the picture of this final stage in what we now know was the murder of Walter Scott. The judge ruled the April 2015 shooting was done out of malice and with forethought, the standards for murder, and he said Slager gave misleading testimony to investigators, constituting obstruction of justice. In court, Scott's family offered Slager forgiveness. Slager's supporters asked the judge for a just and merciful sentence.
Andy, anything you want to say about what happened today?
Following the four-day sentencing, the defense team wouldn't respond to my questions. The Scott family says justice has been served.
He's going to be torn for many, many days. That's a long time.
Before sentencing, Slager apologized to the Scott family.
20 years is a long time, and that's a long time to think about what you've done. But I'm going to tell you something that's even more important is accepting responsibility for what you did. I think that's more important than any amount of time you could do.
One of the most powerful moments in court today was the time that Judy Scott, the mother of Walter Scott, addressed the court. She looked directly at Michael Slager, offering her forgiveness and telling him that she hoped he would accept Jesus and find his forgiveness as well. And then there was a moment where no words were exchanged, but the two were locked in eyes, both tearful. And I can tell you it was one of the most emotional moments that we have seen in both this hearing as well as in the 6-week state trial. Downtown Charleston tonight, I'm Rebecca Collett. Count on 2.